So here we are, and welcome everyone. Hi there, I'm Rachel Chase, and I am here to share an hour with you of art making and talking about grief and loss. And I see we have some decent lighting here for my video. Thanks for bearing with me as I notice I'm rather backlit, but I think you can still see me okay. And we'll go ahead and go forth with our process today together. So it's an honor to be here and share space and hold space for those of you who would like to connect with ways to approach healing around any kind of loss and grief through the process of art making, through creativity. And I have been an arts and wellness ambassador with the Atlantic Center for the Arts for a number of years. And this is an honor to support you in your process. So I've been an expressive arts teacher and mental health professional for a number of years, and this is just a joy for me to share this work with you. So what we're going to do today in this hour together is we're going to explore themes of grief and loss and how it affects us and how we can process the emotions that come up around grief. I'm going to talk about, the process of grieving and what that's like. And in the context of this past year since 2020, with everything that we've all been going through with the pandemic, and also just in general with life, we all experience loss, don't we, at some point or another. And then I'll take us through some processes. Today, I'm actually going to be using some watercolor paint, and some drawing. So if you would like to make sure that you have your art supplies at the ready, we're going to be making some spontaneous imagery to express our emotions together today. So I've got some paint brushes here. And some water, and just some basic watercolors. And you can use whatever kind of paints you would like to explore. Watercolors, I find, are very expressive when it comes to emotions. They have a kind of neat thing that they do that feels very moody. And maybe have a journal or a piece of paper and a pen. I've got mine here as well. We'll do some spontaneous writing as well. And I'll talk about some more tips to think about, some tools that you can use for yourself in your life in the future for, any kind of, any moments in your life when you feel that there's a sense inside of something wanting to come out, but you don't know how to express it, maybe with words. So first, I always like to begin these workshops with just taking a moment to center, take some breaths. Now you might be gathering your art supplies, and that's totally fine. Take your time to do that. And when you're all set up and ready to go, we're just going to take a few breaths together. So I'll just pause and allow you to gather your items that you need for today, that you'd like to have on hand. And then we'll just take some of these breaths together. Maybe make a little sound. Sound is such a healer. When we have emotions inside that need to be expressed, but we don't necessarily feel ready to say words, or it may not be necessary to use words. Sound is such a great thing to do. So we just make a little sound, little sigh. just to check in with your body and maybe do a little movement to release some tension. Any tension that's ready to be released. Yeah, make some sound. You know, it occurred to me this morning, I'm here in the Pacific Northwest. You only adjust the camera a little bit. Sometimes the focus. There we go. That's a little better, isn't it? In the Pacific Northwest where I live, it's been kind of gray outside. So let's see if I can get the camera to stop doing that. There we go. Yeah. It's been gray this morning, and you know, I was thinking about how weather can reflect a mood, right? Weather can sometimes affect our mood too, can't it? Some people say, I love a rainy day. I can just hunker down and take a nap, or it's just something about a rainy day. And then other people say, I cannot stand rainy days. They always make me feel sad and slow, right? You know, and I think it's the same with emotions too. We can think of emotions as weather, right? Like our inner weather, the inner storms that may come, the inner bright sunny days that happen, you know? So I think we can all relate on some level with how our emotions affect us, how the weather affects our emotions, and how our bodies are affected by our emotions, by the weather. It's interesting, isn't it, to think about that. So we'll be thinking about some of these things today and giving ourselves permission for some of those maybe less desirable emotions to have some space. I actually had another thought this morning, and I thought I might bring in my drum just to show it to you first, because isn't it such a beautiful drum? Again, I apologize for my lighting today. I wasn't able to get an extra light to shine on my face, but alas, we do the best we can, and you can hear my voice and you can see me well enough, I'm sure. So, you know, the word catharsis is an important word to think about when we're talking about healing and heavier, maybe we might think of them as negative emotions. And catharsis is just a word that means something to do with a release, right? To release, to have a catharsis is to release. And sometimes drumming, you know, I like to just pick up my drums sometimes, you know. It's been a while, I must say. I haven't used it in a while. I miss it. So this gave me an opportunity to take it back out and refresh my memory that drumming, gosh, can be so cathartic. So, you know, I mean, you may not have a drum like mine, or maybe you've got some pots and pans, you know. Little kids like to get the pots and pans out of the kitchen, don't they? And bang on the pots and pans. And there's something to that, right? This physical motion and that energy that gets pent up. And I think sometimes when that energy gets pent up, we think, oh no, what's wrong with me, right? There must be something wrong inside of me that I have all this tension and stress. But maybe it's just emotion that needs to move, right? So as we're exploring today healing grief and loss with art, I'd like you to think about your body as the artistic medium sometimes too. You know, when we paint, we're moving our body, aren't we? We're using our minds, but we're also allowing the emotions to flow through our arms and our hands into the color, with the color, into the paper, into the page. So that's where we're coming from today. We're just allowing ourselves to be spontaneous as we feel these emotions or seek to allow ourselves to process maybe some old grief that is from a memory, perhaps. And so this breath work, that kind of breathing, or just making sure that as you're making your artwork spontaneously, that you're allowing your breath to happen. And sometimes we hold our breath, don't we? And we don't even realize we're doing it, you know. So it's so important to breathe, to allow those emotions to move. Maybe sometimes even just walking and moving your arms can be a cathartic experience, you know. Stretching the body can move some energy, and release can be a cathartic experience. So, talking about grief a little bit more here, and how complex it can be, right? When we lose something, like maybe when we're a child and we lose our favorite toy or a balloon, or, I mean, I remember that. I remember losing a balloon once and feeling sad, you know? I mean, grief and loss, boy, the subtlest simple things, but then also big important things too, like a loved one, right? Or a job, or a home. And this year, with the pandemic, of course, there's been a lot of wrestling with this, with the loss of the way things were right before, and then going into it. Whew! All of that confusion too. So there's all these emotions: confusion, maybe anger, denial, which is a way that we protect ourselves. Sometimes we think of denial as something bad. And maybe over time, if we stay in that place, we can get stuck there, which isn't such a good thing for our well-being. But sometimes we do go into denial because we have to carry on. We can't dwell in that place. We sometimes denial is involuntary, where we forget that something happened, or we don't want to think about it, or we've been told not to think about it. So, you know, frustration, denial, anger. Then sometimes there's like a reckoning, a wrestling, like where we think it's our fault for the loss, you know, or we want to say, well, if only I would have done this, then this wouldn't have happened. And, you know, in the stages of grief, there's some information out there, some books that have been written about how we bargain sometimes with grief too. And then other times we just feel like, okay, well, this has happened in my life, and I'm willing to just know that it's part of life, that there will be losses, that there will be times when we feel maybe triggered, and something will happen that will remind us of something, and we can be a little bit more in the space of acceptance, right? So just thinking about all of this, you know, and how we all go through it. We all go through this. This is a fact of life. And I want to share with you an image that I created last year in April. So it would have been a little ways into, this is 2020, April 2020. And it was something that just wanted to come through. I was listening to some music of a friend of mine that was sharing a live stream, and I was listening to what he was creating and feeling into my own emotions. The music was helping to draw out my emotions and helping me to just be present in a spontaneous way with my art. And I created this. This is what came out of this probably I don't know how long I spent on it, but I worked on it for a while at that moment, and then I came back to it and kind of fleshed it out a little bit later on. And, I didn't know this is the image that I was going to make. It just happened. I started just making some lines on the paper while I was listening to the music, while I was just letting myself feel what I was feeling. We don't have to necessarily have any meaning about it or attach a lot of words to it or just describe why we're feeling the way we're feeling. We can just feel it, And so I sat there and I just was drawing these shapes. And then I just started pulling some colors that I was attracted to in the moment because that's where my emotions were pulling me. I just let it happen. And this is what I ended up with. So, when you look at it, maybe it evokes some memories to you, or it looks like something, right? It's got kind of an abstract thing going on. Maybe some of the shapes resemble some things in nature or some things in structure or time even. It makes me think of the movement of time from the past to the future. Or, and sometimes when we make art, it's almost like a premonition. Like we make something and then we see something in our outer world that is like, oh my gosh, there's a connection, So that's the thing about art and life. We're expressing the connection. I also did this other one last year that was just a sketch of a girl. Maybe it's my inner child or something, or she's got some tears coming, doesn't she? Yeah. I wasn't necessarily crying when I made it, but I was just letting this part of me come through and come out. So whatever comes through today, it might just be some lines that start, where you're just kind of making some shapes, and then we just start to fill it in with some color that comes. Maybe there's some words that you want to put in it too. Like, let's see, I've got this one over here. It's sort of like about healing the heart in a way, and I traced my hand and then I wrote some words. And I think I was thinking about this, I was kind of feeling like low self-esteem, or this kind of low feeling of not feeling my best, and that can come with grief too, where because of the losses, we sometimes maybe they get in the way of our ability to feel good about ourselves, And so through our art, we can bring that out and allow the process to soothe us, to soothe our hearts, and bring in some loving kindness toward ourselves through our art making. So these are just the topics I thought I'd bring in around grief and loss for us to think about, just to bring us into this space. And now I'd like us to go ahead and, get your materials ready, and I'm going to lead us through a little journey, and you're just going to spontaneously let whatever comes come through. Maybe you've already started making your art. Maybe you've done one thing while you're listening to me, and now you're going to make another one. Who knows? Just let it flow. And we'll do the writing in a minute. We're going to do the writing after. Usually, sometimes, I tend to do the writing first sometimes and then the art. But today we're going to just do it the other way around. And so I'm going to get my paints out. I'm going to get my brushes. I'm just grabbing. I'm not thinking like, oh yes, I need this one and that one because it's going to look like this. I'm just grabbing some brushes. And I'm attracted to these colors right now, so I'm going to get those out. I have some paper towels to dab my brush as I need. And I've got a Sharpie too. And you can use a Sharpie, you can use a pen, you could use a pencil if you'd like too, if you want to just sort of let the lines fade into the background. So I've got some pencils here. And I'd like you to close your eyes for just a moment. And I want you just to feel into your body. Notice what your body is feeling and take a big breath. You may also have some tea or water on hand. Make sure you don't drink the water for your paints. Just feel your body, feel what's coming up in your body and sensations you're noticing. And, you know, as I've been talking, maybe there's been some specific losses that have come to mind for you, or maybe there's one in particular you'd like to work with today. And just think about what the loss has meant to you, and also think about why the loss means so much. You know, when we lose something, it matters, and we grieve because it matters. We grieve because there was some love there or some attachment to it that meant something. You know, when we lose a loved one, it's because there was so much to our stories that we shared together. And, you know, phases of life and transitions, there's so much meaning and richness and the beauty of what we had. Maybe even that balloon, you know, it brought joy to me that day, didn't it? As a young girl. And maybe it symbolized something like freedom, or, you know, there are these rich gifts and blessings, you know, that we receive from the things that mean so much to us. So I'd like you to just start to make some lines spontaneously, just kind of some shapes maybe that remind you of your feelings, or maybe as you were feeling into your sensations, some colors and shapes came to mind. If you want to start with the color first, you're welcome to start with the color first and just make lines later or words later. You know, maybe you're just feeling like, I just feel like I have to use this color right now. Just go slow. Maybe you're actually making an image of something that is about that person, a symbol that represents how they made you feel, or about that job and what it gave you. Maybe there's some words, or maybe as you're thinking about these things, it doesn't matter if it's exact, it's just the feeling you're having as you're making your lines. And it doesn't need to mean anything right now, because it's going to come through later what it means. The art will show you something when you're done with it. The image, the feeling will come through, and maybe it's just the energy of doing it that just feels healing. The activity of making that brings the healing. And I just want you to feel really spontaneous here. I want you to give yourself permission to just combine and move things around. Color, shape, line, emotion. Don't worry about like, oh no, I didn't do that right, or don't worry about it. You can always cover it up or do something different, or change your mind in the middle of it. There's no mistakes. It's just whatever happens. It's just about expressing. You can always let the paint dry and then go back in with another color on top and put some other images or lines or shapes in there later. Maybe even pictures. You could collage it. You know, photography or magazine pictures. You know, mixed media. It's a great way to show the complexities of emotion. I'm using some watercolor paper with my watercolor today. Watercolor paper is quite thick. And maybe you're just painting right on some thin drawing paper, which is fine too. That's what I did that other piece on. It was just some regular drawing paper. Maybe you're surprising yourself. Maybe you thought you'd paint something gloomy, but now it's joyful. Or maybe the other way around. Just keep going. Just keep making shapes. Keep going. Keep using your drawing implements and your paints. Maybe you go back and forth. I think I'm going to go back and forth here. I'll find my Sharpie again. Certain ideas start to come through. Certain insights start to happen. It's almost like it can tell you a story right as it happens. It's like that idea of spontaneity is, it's really just the natural way, isn't it? Life is, much as we try to plan everything, life is spontaneous, isn't it? Just think of the birds flying spontaneously through the sky. The leaves falling from the trees spontaneously. There is a certain timing about it, though, right? Seems like around here the birds love to come out and play in the evening. Makes me think how there's seasons of life. Phases, and sometimes life feels more playful and other times more somber. The natural way of life. Just gonna see if the camera wants to focus a little better here today. This is spontaneous, right? As much as I planned out my media setup, it did what it wanted to do today. So, c'est la vie, right? This is part of it. And in that way we can surrender sometimes and just say, okay, here's what I'm feeling. I'm just going to let it come. You know? Like maybe we don't want to feel a certain way because we got to get our work done or, you know, get through the day or take care of our children or, you know, but maybe it's just like, okay, here I am, a human being, giving myself permission to be a human being, and then other people get to see that too. And maybe it gives them permission to be a human too, to feel what they're feeling. And we can share, connect with each other more authentically when we don't hide our grief, when we actually show it to each other. Sometimes we don't want to do that because we want to protect the other person. We think, well, if I show them my grief, then they'll feel sad too, and I don't want to make them feel sad. But you know, I think it's worth the risk. Because it does give the other person, I think, permission for their grief too. Now I'm just going to show you a little bit of what I'm doing on my paper, because you might want to play with this too if you haven't worked a lot with watercolors. See what I mean about the moodiness of watercolors? So I'm just going to put a swath of water. And isn't it neat how then I can just touch it and put this color, and then it sort of moves around. Just kind of goes around, and the color follows the water around. I mean, you know, that's not the prettiest thing in the world, is it? But I just want to show you. But it sure is expressive, right? Sure is expressive. Maybe some of these lines are about, like, the darker feelings. Like, it's okay to have them. It's okay. Maybe it's not dark. It's just, and maybe it is dark, and maybe dark isn't bad or evil. You know, sometimes I think we associate darkness with something to fear. And so we fear our own emotions because they feel dark. But you know, the very thing that starts to happen when we feel them and acknowledge them is the healing begins. It's like instantaneous. The healing can begin when we start to accept them, witness them, look at them, acknowledge, notice them, give them permission to exist, and share them, either with someone that we feel close with, that we trust to share our emotions with, like a friend or family member, or therapist, or teacher. And in the sharing, something magical happens. We get to move into this more like loving space. The loving space with the grief. Yeah. And we get to receive the kindness of others. And we get to see ourselves reflected in each other. And we don't feel alone anymore. We feel accepted. Yeah. So I'm just kind of letting the paint drip. I did some lines, and I started filling those lines in more like the other painting, but then this started happening, like the floodgates wanting to open up and just release. Just release some of those emotions, or at least the energy of them. Yeah. So just continue your process of allowing the colors to come, the lines and the shapes to happen. Just let it flow. Maybe you're using markers or something and you're coloring in a picture. That's fine too. Whatever supplies you have is fine. Paint gives us an opportunity to really move things around, you know, move the body. So does drawing, you know, drawing can. Maybe sometimes the movement is vigorous. Sometimes it's tedious, it's small. We get in there. It looks like my lines have just moved into the background a little bit. I'm not trying to make it perfect or color inside any lines right now. Just breathing and flowing. Yeah. Just keep hitting the colors, whatever comes. Permission. Sometimes we think, is it okay for me to feel this way? Is it okay for me? Is this right? Am I doing this right? Just let go. It doesn't matter. Permission to be human. Being human means all the feelings. Just allowing it to be seen. See, something's happening here. Something is being felt here. So in a minute, we're going to pause the process for just a bit, and we'll come back to it. And pause it for just a few minutes of writing. A moment. Let some of the paint dry. And then we'll come back to it. Starting to tell a story, isn't it? I'm starting to show you something, right? Yeah. That's important. Let it show you something. Maybe right now you don't know what it is, but you know something's happening. Maybe the memories. Maybe just the feeling. All right, we're going to take a pause here on the painting part or the drawing part, whatever you're doing there. I don't want this to completely drip on my laptop, but I'll show you where it's going. So this is just going to dry, at least somewhat, for a moment. And now I want you to just step back from it and move your body. So if you can stand up, I'm going to invite us all to stand for a little bit. And just do a little bit of stretching and maybe even walk around your space, you know. Oh, make some sound. Oh. Maybe even patting on your chest and lifting your knees up high into the air and shaking your body a little bit. Ah, catharsis, release. Maybe moving the body in flowing ways. Maybe there's some lines that you made and you can move your body in ways that mirror the shapes on your page. Maybe the rhythm of some of the mark making that you did on your art. Maybe there's some movements that resemble that. Maybe you're doing this process with some friends or family members and you can look at each other and shake and stretch and dance in the space together. Or maybe just hug each other. maybe smile at each other and say something like, I see you. I appreciate you. Words of kindness and acceptance, body movements, breath, holding your heart for a moment. Giving yourself a little space to just be, get a little drink of water perhaps. When we're working with some of the heavier emotions, it's good to give ourselves time to pause sometimes, and pause to give space for the emotions to be felt, but also pause when we're feeling them to just be and imagine some light and bring in some energy to our hearts of kindness and compassion, and some reminders and reassurances that no matter what we're feeling, we're still okay. Permission granted, right? Okay. So I want you to get your journal out now, or your paper and your pen. Hey, if you're on a roll and you want to keep making your art, go for it, right? But I'm going to invite us into this little side note. A note. Let's think of this as a note. A note of appreciation, a note of gratitude for what it is that you received from the thing that you lost, from the person, from the job, or from the experience that you had with that part of your life. And I'd love for you just to take some time with this, really sit with it, and maybe it's a love letter to yourself or to someone else or to that experience of gratitude and thanks. Here we go. Or just a list of the gifts that you received from that experience. All of the qualities of beauty and goodness of that experience, even if the experience wasn't all good. We're just going to take a moment to list or write a note of gratitude, like a thank you note, maybe even. I'm going to start mine that way. Maybe just even thinking of how maybe I'm thinking of a friend that I lost actually. Last year during 2020, I lost a dear friend. And as I'm writing this, I'm reflecting on some things I wasn't expecting to write. So just let yourself write whatever comes. And take one more minute to write. Okay, wherever you are with your writing, I invite you to pause, take a breath, just put a hand on your heart, and sigh. And just bow your head for a moment and thank yourself for giving yourself permission to do this activity today, to have this experience. Because you're giving yourself a gift right now. You're giving yourself a big gift right now. And that is so beautiful, I think. All right. Now, you might want to think about putting some of the words that you wrote here in here. Like writing it really big, or maybe even cutting it out and after it's dry, pasting it. I don't know, maybe not, if it's too private, But that's a way of working with the mixed media where you can actually take the words, maybe cut them in different shapes. You might even want to decorate it, put some lines around it, cut it out and put it on there, or not. Just leave it out altogether. It's just a separate thing, But I feel like there's a couple of words from this that came through that I might want to put in here as part of the piece. And I think I need a little bit of a bigger, like a marker maybe, to do it. For this one at least. So maybe I'll get a bigger Sharpie. So you can either just go right back to what you were doing and pick up where you left off and get some colors and go back in there. Or start to think about ways you can incorporate some of these words in here. I think that's a really great way to add to this, is to put some words if you haven't already done that. And it just wants to be like this for some reason. Like, I don't know why, right? Sometimes we think, oh, I hope this doesn't mess it up, right? When we're making our art, it's not going to mess it up. It's just going to work. That's all. It's just going to be part of the message for you today. It's just an expression of the feeling. Yeah, remember that breath, right? Now, when I first started making this, I wasn't necessarily making it about the loss of this particular friend, but that's what's happening right now. Adding to it. And I'm going to paint into that word now. So just let yourself do what feels right for you. Of course, as an art teacher, if I were in person with you, I would see what you're making, probably. But I don't get to see what you're making in this format, and so I have to be okay with that. That's a loss, right? That's me as a teacher, right? So many ways, right? Okay, well, I have to be okay with that. If you ever want to share them with me, you're welcome to do so. My email is rachel@rachelchase.com. You can reach out that way. Or if you're feeling bold and brave, you can share your work as imagery on the Atlantic Center for the Arts Facebook page. I think you could do that. I don't know if you have, actually, I don't even know if there's some pages, can't have people post pictures on it, but maybe. Could try. So lots of surprises came through for me in mine. You think about that right now. What is the story? What came through? And as we're closing this process in the next 5-10 minutes here, you can this is not, it's not over. You can keep working on this after I complete this video. And some thoughts that might get your juices flowing about things is I've got this rhythm, and these wavy lines are making me think of how life has rhythm, ups and downs, how our emotions have ups and downs. It's just the way it is. It just happens. That it's not worth it to try to fight the ups and downs, make it all the same all the time, because it's not going to work. It just won't work. I mean, there is such a thing as the middle way of experiencing life and being able to recognize when we're moving in extremes. But even those extremes have some kind of gift in them, It's just because we need to feel at that time. We're feeling deeply. Those extremes just mean we're feeling deeply. There's nothing wrong with those extremes. It's a matter of recognizing what we're feeling now so that we can move into forgiveness and acceptance and acknowledging those feelings, giving them permission to tell us something about ourselves. So the word that came through for me was forgiveness. I wrote a little thank you letter to my friend, and we used to laugh a lot. We had a lot of laughs. It's also a complicated relationship. It was rocky. There were times when I wasn't sure if our friendship was going to make it. But because of a willingness on both of our parts to come together, and willingness on my part to forgive, we got to still have that friendship and enjoy the parts where we could support each other. So whatever you ended up creating, whether it was about the loss of a pet maybe, or a home, or something that happened in your childhood, or gosh, it could be anything, right? Something that happened this year. I hope that you're able to still think about the good memories and the gifts, of the experience that you got to have. Sometimes we forget, and that's okay too. Sometimes we look through old pictures, and it reminds us of times we had forgotten happened. And sometimes it's just about carrying it in our hearts, carrying it in our hearts. So feel free to continue painting there. And I feel like mine is at a place where it just wants to dry, so I'm going to let it dry. I'd love to hear about your experience with this process. So I know this video is going to be posted on YouTube, I believe, as well. And it's on the Atlantic Center for the Arts Facebook page, and it'll be shared on my personal Facebook pages as well. And just love to hear your personal experiences with this, and any insights and aha moments that came through. And just remember, when it comes to grief, it comes and goes in waves. And it's just the nature of it. We don't ever get rid of the feeling of maybe sadness. Or maybe we do. It depends on what it was that we lost, right? But especially with those things that really mean a lot to us. It's part of our story, and it's what makes us who we are as humans, as feelers. It's just natural. It's a natural part of life. Give yourself space when you feel those waves coming on to just be with yourself. Take that walk. Call the friend. Give yourself permission to just feel it and breathe and stretch and move and paint and write and drum. Reach out for support when you need it, when it gets too hard. You're not alone. We're all in this thing together called life, moving through the stages and phases of joy, of sadness, all the range of multitudes of human emotion that we have. And we are allowed to feel those emotions. It's what makes us human, after all. So again, I thank you so much for taking this time for yourself, for you. Thank you for acknowledging the need to do this work, because it's so important. And that's really special. And I hope you share this with others who might get value in it too, and that might appreciate moving through some of their grief too. So as always, it's an honor to be part of the Atlantic Center for the Arts and Wellness Ambassador team, and continue to share these practices and processes with you all in our community and beyond. Have a wonderful day, night, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is in your day at this time. Again, I'm Rachel Chase, and it's been a pleasure to connect with you in this way. Take care. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.